All right. So today, what I wanted to talk about was setting up a seller template. We were going to talk a little bit about required disclosures, and I wonder if we could close the door back there. I can usually drown people out, but um, wrong one. All right. So sorry about that. I'm logging into kw.com. You might be wondering why. Why? And I just wanted to show you, I'm going to create some new folders. Does everybody know that once you've logged into kw.com, how to get to the intranet? See the little button down there? It says KW Intranet. It also says there KW Intranet. And down here, it says KW Intranet. And it doesn't really matter which one. You want to go to the KW Intranet. You don't have to all do this right this minute, but I'm going to be using some forms, and I know what you're going to say is, how do I get a copy of that form? And this is how. So once you're into the intranet, what you want to do is click on where it says Market Center. And when you're here, there's a button that says Documents. And if you click on that, I just created a new folder, which is called Disclosures and Forms 2015. I may be adding to that as I can think of things, but there's a listing template win forms 2/24/2015. And if you click on it, it's going to open up eventually. And this is what it looks like. And so this would be a good form to have. It talks about what you would need if you were going to do a listing. And I'm going to reformat that. I don't know why it jumps off. But so this would be a good form to have. Just saying that. I think I already said that. The other one is KW Disclosures 2/24/2015. And if you click on that, what you're going to find is a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, now I'll talk a little more about this, but basically this is the packet of stuff that we're going to want in order for them to be happy. This is what we're going to want. And so you might want to look. Now, my goal today is not to go through all these disclosures. We're going to do that in another class. Right? But I just wanted you to see where they are. Some of these may be provided by the listing agent. So what I wanted to do today was talk about how to create a template, and we'll go back and forth. Why not? So in order to do this, you have to log into car.org. You have to, oops, and if you just don't log in like I did, let me go back. Back. All right. So smooth. It's better to sign in first. Now, it is possible for you to learn how to just sign into zip forms by itself, but it's way more difficult. If you just sign in to car.org, is there anybody here who's had their license for more than a little while who doesn't know how to get into this? Anyhow, because this is the first thing you need to do. We're going to click on Access Now, and then all this fun stuff's going to come up. And and we wait, and we wait. And I do realize that this system is very slow at times. If you're following along and it's not moving, I can't do anything about it. All right. Boy. Yours already in. So that's why mine slowed down. So, okay. So I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Main Street, Mike sounds like something I would do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that little and I'm going to click on open. Or why don't we do this? We'll just start with let's say we're going to do a seller template. So if those of you that were here last week know that I talked about creating a buyer template where you want to add the basic forms and fill out your information for selling agent. If we're going to create a seller template, a logical place to begin would be to click on where it says templates, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over, scooch it over a little bit like this. And this way I can see if Tim has questions as we go along. Okay. All right. So once we've clicked on templates, these are the ones that are here now. Hopefully you won't see all of these. But we've been busy. So what we want to do is create a new template. So we might as well click on the new template. If it's a listing template for residential, we don't have to change anything here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say LI listing template, and I'm putting in my name. So the obvious, and we're going to click on save. Now, if we've already have a template, we could modify it or import it. But now that we've created a template, the template, it looks a little bit different than what it looks like if you create a transaction. Notice here in the transactions, we would be on this tab over here, but we're in templates. And what we're going to do is click on add. We want to add a form. And the way you add forms, my thing is over here is all the different forms. And so I'm going to click on that. And the first one to add is the cover sheet. And then maybe the residential listing agreement. What other form might we want? Agency. Why not? So, and then let's just go through the list. So, does anybody remember how to find the agency form? It starts with a D. Of course, agency starts with a D. I don't know why. So, and there are 3 disclosures regarding agency relationships. The first one is the one we want if we're representing a seller. It's a listing firm to seller. So we're going to click on that and it's going to add. Now, if we want to cheat, we could have printed this out and look at it. So what forms are here? All right, well, we've done number 1, residential. We haven't done that one yet. So the RESIDENTIAL, if we just type in residential, why don't we spell it? Spell it right. Come on. It's just been one of those days. RESIDENTIAL. All right. And the residential listing agreement exclusive. There's a bunch of residential listing agreements. If you've picked open or agency, you've just done it wrong. Right? You've made a mistake. You want residential listing agreement exclusive. If you picked one of the other ones, you should be talking to somebody like me, Jeff, Mike, because you've made an error. So we've added those. What other forms are there here? Let's look at seller exclusion from the MLS. Now, there are actually 2 versions of this form. One of them is provided by the multiple listing service. It's called the authorization to exclude from the MLS, which you can download from the MLS. I've been told the MLS, by the way, on their form says you have to use their form. It says using other forms is no good. They don't really police this very well. Lindsay tells me that she just uses the CAR form. And she does this. She's the transaction coordinator for Quincy. And Quincy is like the chairman of the MLS. So when I heard that, I said, well, who am I to say you can't use that form? So the seller exclusion from the MLS, can anybody tell me why we want to have that form? Don't we want it on the MLS?
There's a delay between when you're taking the listing and when you're going to actually list the property.
Authorization to, all right. What? How long do you have under MLS rules? 3 days. I have to see if I can find it. Here, seller instructions to exclude listing from the internet, seller instructions to include listing from the MLS. So I just typed in EXCLU just because I'm lazy. So seller instructions to exclude listing from the MLS. So we have 3 days in order to turn it in, and if you don't submit it within 3 days, you violated the rules of the MLS. They have a trial. It's like a little, well, they fine you is what happens. So yes, question?
No, I just went to training and they said that you can extend that. You just need to call them. And tell them like my 72 hours is up. I need to extend it for another 1 days.
My suggestion is that you bring a copy of this form with you on a listing appointment. Because what's going to happen is that one of the objections the seller could give you for why won't they sign tonight, right? Does everybody understand the purpose of going on a listing appointment is to sign the listing? Right? I don't know, you might want to write that down, right? But the reason that we're going on the appointment is to leave with a signed listing agreement, not an appointment to sign a listing agreement. So one of the objections that the seller will give is it's not ready. Right? There's stuff I need to do. I need to get things fixed up. And your response should be, that's great, that's wonderful, we can accommodate that. But for you as an agent to get started on researching, preparing marketing materials, and doing the stuff that you have to do, shouldn't you be hired first? Wouldn't that seem to be a reasonable thing? So we can go ahead and sign the listing agreement, but we're not going to put it onto the MLS until it's ready. You should always have a copy of that form with you. By the way, since we're talking about it, one of the other forms that, I don't know if I really want to go to the trouble of finding it, but one of the other forms that I would recommend that you bring with you is called a listing input form from the MLS. A listing input form, and by the way, copies of them are available on our website. Remember, I went on the back end of kw.com. Remember where I showed you the other? You'll also find that there are the listing input forms, which are the forms. There's a class 1 for single family and a class 2 for condos and townhomes. And this has all of the boxes and things that you might want to check when you're putting a listing into the MLS. So the reason I suggest that is because if I've had agents go on a listing appointment and they got the listing and they came back and they asked me to help them put it into the MLS, which by the way, I'm very happy to help you put a listing into the MLS. And so we pull up the MLS and they start to go through and answer questions. And there's questions they don't know the answer to, right? The MLS is asking questions that the agent does not know the answer to. And I always start by saying, did you take the listing input form with you when you went to their house? No, I didn't do that. Oh, I just took notes like on a cocktail napkin or something like that. So now I'm sitting there watching them call the client up on the phone to ask them questions so that they know enough to put it into the MLS. Right? Do you understand? You don't have to live like that. So if you take the listing input form with you, by the way, it's also very good to go through that form with the client, because they think that there may be choices that are not there. And they're going to say, well, why did you put this in? Why didn't you put that in? And it's a lot easier if you say, look, here are the choices. All right, here are the 6 boxes. I get to pick one. All right, which one would you pick? By the way, I had gotten to the point where I had people, there's a place for them to sign that form. I would have them initial next to certain sections so that they couldn't later tell me that they never knew what the choices were. Yes.
So is that form here in the on this website, or is it somewhere else?
Where is it? So let's say we were to go here. Can anybody, let's see, where is it? Transactions Technology, PRDS, MLS data sheets. Okay. That's old school. They used to be called a data sheet. Now they're simply called listing input forms. I'm the one who put all these here. This is what it looks like. Hopefully, this is what it looks like. And by the way, so here are the boxes. A lot of this information, I might as well go through this now. A lot of this information at the top is going to be put in automatically once you put in the APN number. All right, a lot of this will be in automatically. And also, they're going to ask you questions about the list price and the expiration date, so you're not going to be writing that in. But once we get to interior, you start to see boxes to check. And the little asterisks are things that you have to make a selection or they will not allow you to move forward. All right. By the way, if you don't know what you're doing and you're nervous and scared, my suggestion would be only answer the questions you have to. Right? Because you could add later. You can add things later. By the way, yeah, question?
If you have them sign an exclusion to add it to the MLS, and then later you are putting it in MLS, what would the list date be? Would it be the date you're putting it into the MLS, or the date that you had them took the listing and they signed the exclusion?
That's a very good question. So, what date do I want to put in the MLS? 1 month ago, do I want it to start on the market 30 days? Or would I like it to begin day one? So we start at the day that we put it in the MLS. That's the date we say the MLS is the date of the listing, right? Now, you could argue whether or not that's true, but what does the owner want you to do? Put it in the market and say it's on the market that day, right? So we put in, even if I signed the listing agreement last month and I'm putting it in today is the day of the listing. Right. And sometimes that makes the end date a little funky because if it's a 6-month listing, right? Is that a good amount of time to have for a listing?
Mm-hmm.
6 months?
If you can get it.
If you can get it. Sometimes you have to settle for 180 days, right? Which is instead of 6 months, right? But let's say I'm just teasing you, 24 weeks. How about that? I used to say, okay, how about 24 weeks? Just make it simple, right? So if it's a 90-day listing, you understand then the expiration date should be the date that it expires in the listing, right? Which may not actually be 90 days. Question?
I'm trying pretty much to keep everything online.
Good.
So not deal with paper copies anymore as I once did. I do not know. I mean, I realize I can download this form from kw.com, correct?
Correct. You can download this form from. You can also get it from the multiple listing service.
However, I thought I heard you say something that once you put in the APN number, it fills out everything for you.
Yes.
How does that happen if all I did was save a copy?
Because it's not writing it here that's going to do any good. It's when you are going into the MLS and you click on add listing and they want the APN number, they're going to suck in a lot of information. The reason that I'm suggesting that you carry this with you is because unless you're putting it in with your laptop in front of the seller. Right. Now, if you're doing that, you may not need this form because basically this is just what's going to be online. But let's say that you have an authorization. The reason this came up in my mind is because of the authorization to exclude from the MLS. So we're not putting it into the MLS right now, are we? Right. We're at the house. They've signed the listing agreement, but we're not putting it into the MLS because they want a couple of weeks to clean stuff up, remove garbage, and do some other stuff. So, but I would rather, while I was there, to go through this form with them and make the appropriate check boxes. And by the way, this could be done electronically, where you can click on the boxes. All you need to know is how to convert a PDF into a form filling PDF, right? And for those of you, it's a lot easier to just print this out and mark on it. The idea is that you want this list. By the way, there's a California Civil Code section that says that a real estate agent is liable, responsible for what is put into the multiple listing service. Did you know that? There's a California Civil Code section that says that you could be held responsible for the information you put into the multiple listing service. Did you know that? Right. And so what I used to have, if there was something that was debatable or I wasn't sure, I'd actually have them initial next to that particular section. But we want this form with us so we know all the questions that we're going to need to ask them. Right. By the way, what I would suggest that you do, whether you handwrite it out now, I have to admit I didn't really do that, but I made sure that my clients saw the remarks that I was putting in that were both public and private. Can anybody guess why I would want the client to read them, preferably before I put them in the MLS? Litigation. Also, if I'm saying something I don't really, the public ones they're going to see anyhow. But if I'm saying something in the private ones that I don't want them to see, I'm probably doing something wrong. You understand? Right? If I'm saying seller is desperate, bring any offer. By the way, I've had sellers tell me to put that in. Right? But I'm not kidding. He said, put it in. So, all right. All right. And then I'm just saying, and notice there's a place for the broker to sign and the seller to sign. Right? I used to get people to fill this out because I think it's important. All right, but that's not a form. By the way, we could actually include this form. We actually could include this form. I'll show you how. What else is on our list? Because that's how I got off on this tangent. What else is on our list? Homeowner information request form. If there is a homeowner association, is that a CAR form or not? Does anyone know?
I think it is. Right, I remember. Yes, it is.
So the answer is yes. It's a shoot. What did I just do? Templates. Go back to documents. What did I just do? I clicked on. How about this?
Thanks, you want to print.
I don't really want to print. So I'm not going to go through HOMEOWNER homeowner. Homeowner Association information form. So, by the way, could we have one template for a homeowner association, one template for a single family home without a homeowner association? So you're going to get an opportunity to do this on your own. Notice Lindsay, God bless her, has put in generic, not on WIN forms, generic, not on WIN forms, generic, not on WIN forms, agent visual inspection disclosure. The AVID is a form. Do I need to do all of these?
No.
All right, you guys, is everybody get it?
That list found.
You send me $5 through my PayPal account, or you go. How do we find that list that I'm going through?
You said to go to the internet.
Go to the internet.
Let's see, kw.com. Go to Market Center. Go under Documents, Disclosure Forms 2015. And KW disclosures.
They're there. So this is, you have to log in to the intranet. Go to kw.com, click on the intranet, click on Market Center, click on Documents, and Disclosures and Forms 2015. You're going to find them. How are we doing? All right, so that was exciting. What you definitely want to do is make sure that your information is in the cover sheet. Remember, right now we're doing templates. So there are a couple of ways in which you can put your information in. One is you could go to parties. Now it has buyer and seller and service parties. We could add a party. Probably the easiest way to do this is if we go back to documents is to click on the cover sheet itself. And so there's a certain point where importing your information or storing your information is going to be of value. But what we want to do is we want to scroll down to where it says listing broker information. And here you're going to put in Keller Williams, Silicon Valley, V-A-L-E-Y, the address, and I'm really not planning on just spelling everything out. Does anybody know what our BRE number is?
Hold on a second. 0132. Remember, Mike, I can't. My computer's working. I can't grab it.
All right. So I haven't got it memorized either, but you need to know that as well. I'll put, there's a sheet for the office profile. I'll upload it into those forms as well. You need to put in the city, the state, the zip, office phone number if you want to. This is your BRE number, your name, your phone number, and your email address. Now, fax numbers and some of these others, that's up to you. What's a pager? I don't know. Anyhow. And then once you've done that, all you have to do now is save this.
What form is this on? This is the cover sheet?
This is called the cover sheet, yes. So the reason we want to do this on the cover sheet is so that each time we have a listing, we launch the template and we don't have to type in our name, the office number, our phone number, our email, the office phone number. We don't have to do that every time. Right? You do it one time, you make a template, you save the template, and then when you get a listing, you launch the template. Right? How are we doing on this? Okay. So, by the way, how many of you last week put together a buyer template? Oh, wow. I'm touched. So the idea is next week to put in a seller template. Right? Does everybody know how to find the list of the forms? Now, what I would like you to do also, by the way, what we've done so far is not the fun part, right? We're coming to the fun part. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to transactions, and we're going to pretend that we have a listing. Doesn't that sound like a good thing? Right? Doesn't that sound like a really good thing? So what we're going to do is this is how you would use the template. So we're going to go over here and notice across the top, it gives us contacts, templates, transactions, right? You ought to spend the time to put your information in, by the way, under a contact. Just saying it's going to save you time when you're making templates. You also can put your buyers and sellers information. And then, but let's just start with transactions. What we're going to do is click on new. We're going to create a transaction. Listing name, and we're going to call this 12345 Main Street. And it's a listing and it's residential, and now we can apply the template. And what we're going to do is, how about this one? 1234 Listing Avenue. That's not my template. This one looks like buyer template, technology class, listing template, Mike D. That's how I have to clean these out. I'm surprised no one's yelled at me yet. And then I'm going to click on save. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a transaction. Notice, see all those forms? Beautifully added. So I'm now starting with those forms. If I looked at the cover sheet, it has what little information I did put in. Okay. Does that sound like fun? Mm-hmm. Now, what I might do, how much time do I have? Why don't we look at the residential listing agreement? Does that sound like a fun thing to do? No? No one's interested.
But nobody's left the room.
Not physically. So, here, let's go back. So what I wanted to do, I'll show you what I want to do. I'm going to go to the cover sheet and I'm going to fill out enough information for a listing. So our Sally, oops. Sally Seller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Main Street, Campbell, California, 95008. County, it does appear some places. Clara, we don't really care about all this, but we do care about that. 24, San Jose. And, all right, so I'm using one of my many aliases. We do care about the email address. And when we go down to the property information, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Main Street. Now, I didn't actually need to do it before because what that was asking me was CAPB. I didn't really need to do that before because that was their address. This is the address of the property. And I don't know why I did it, but I did it. Santa Clara. And all right. Legal description. What agents usually do is put in the assessor parcel number here, right? Or just go ahead and put in the assessor parcel number there. What's a good parcel number? I think that looks like one. List date, we're going to say is today. Expiration date, I'm going to just pick a day, May 21st. List price. Now, you'll notice I'm doing all this in the cover sheet. How much, what did I end up listing? All right. Now, whether or not you put in the balance of the mortgage, second mortgage, and other liens, part of my reason for covering this is because not everything that's in the cover sheet do you really need to use. The reason that that's there is that there is a CAR form where you can do an estimate of the seller's net on your own using a calculator. I would not recommend doing this. What I would recommend is to call a friendly title company up. They're all pretty friendly. And ask them, tell them that you have a listing, right? That'll get their attention. And they'll do a net sheet for you. Right. In order to do it, I know most of the expenses, but you have to know how much title insurance and escrow fees are. So we don't need to be filling this information out. Balance of first or second and other liens, descriptions, total. We don't need to do that because it's not going to be populated anywhere unless we're doing our own net sheet, which we're not going to do. Homeowner association dues, that actually doesn't go on the form anywhere. There isn't a form that says homeowner association dues, but eventually it's going to go in the MLS. You understand? Filling out these forms isn't putting it in the MLS, but we might want to put that in just so we know. Transfer fee, document preparation fee. These are all fees that we don't really need to know. Purchase, in other words, we're not doing anything with this on the forms. It's not going to be populated anywhere on the listing agreement. We don't know what the purchase price is or the closing date or any of that other stuff. Right? We know that it's residential property, but we don't really need all this other stuff. We can put in escrow information, however. There is a place for that to be, well, how about this? I wouldn't bother with that either, right? Because the only place that that really shows up on a form is in the purchase agreement. We're not doing that. And I'm going to just, I know I didn't fill all that out. We don't need any of that other stuff. Right? You don't need to be putting in any of this other stuff in this form, right? Because there isn't anything that we're going to use that actually populates. So I'm going to go to save. And now that I've done this, if I click on the back button, and you ought to play with this until you get good at it, we're going to click on the residential listing agreement. And notice what's happened is it filled out a lot of this information already. See? Right, it's already filled it out. It knows when it's beginning and when it's ending because I put it in the form. Items included and excluded. By the way, I like it that they've moved that up to the top because I used to use that when I was talking to sellers as a way of getting them used to signing the form. And by the way, if you printed it out, sometimes we print it out, sometimes you do it on a computer. A lot of times the owners are not coming into the office to do this. So you might be at their house, so you might have printed it out. So one of the questions, by the way, what I believe, this is just a tip about getting people to sign listing agreements. I believe that people will not sign a blank listing agreement. Right? I'm starting with that premise. That in order to get somebody to sign the listing agreement, we're going to have to fill it out first. Does anybody want to debate that theory? So if we don't, so what I would be on an appointment and the owner would say, when I walked in, he'd say, I just want you to know we're not signing anything tonight. I'd say, that's great, that's fine. You don't have to sign. I'm not here to ask you to sign anything. Right? And then while we were talking, I would reach into my bag and pull out a copy of the listing agreement and put it on the table. And people would look at it, right? You know, and they'd say, you know, I'm not signing anything tonight. I understand. Right? And then I'd say, tell me, are there any items in the house that you definitely want to take with you? Do you want to make sure that the buyer doesn't get, right? What is, let me know what you want to stay. And then they would say stuff and I would pull out the form and I would start writing on the form. Right, here's additional items excluded. Even if it's something that normally wouldn't be included, if they said, I'd start to write it in. And I'd have people look at me and they'd say, what are you doing? Right? I'm taking notes. And they'd say, well, we told you we weren't going to sign anything tonight. If I'm not asking, I just think it's proper to put the notes in the right place. Right? You understand? This is not the right place to write that note. Right now, do you understand what's happened is that the form has come out of my case onto the table and we're writing on it. I've actually had people turn it around and say, well, they'd point at it and say, could you write this in too? Right? Right? Do you understand? We're filling out the form, which is a necessary step in order to get anybody to sign the form. I'm just saying. All right. So commission, can we just go through a quick listing agreement? Is that all right? Why not? Additional terms, just because it's there, it doesn't mean you have to write something in. Right? I have people call me up and say, what should I write here? Don't write anything. Just because it's there, don't write something in. What would an example, I don't really want to talk about if there's some sort of a special fee or something you might want to, I wouldn't write anything in here. Compensation to broker. Now, usually you'd click on that and you'd type in a %, right? So let's just say 6. Now, and there's a place for you to write in something else. Don't write, if you're writing something in here, you're probably doing something wrong, right? You understand? So you want to say the %. Now, paragraph 1, which is an interesting paragraph to read, it basically says, well, what is it? By the way, it lists all the different ways in which you could get paid. That's not a good paragraph. It says, if during the listing period or any extension, broker, cooperating broker, seller, or any other person. That's 4 different ways. The broker, cooperating broker, seller, or any other person procures a ready, willing, and able buyer who's offered to purchase a property on any price and terms is accepted by the seller, provided the buyer completes the transfer and is prevented from doing so by seller. Broker is entitled to compensation whether any escrow resulted from such offer closes during or after the expiration of the listing period. So if prevented from doing so by seller, the seller owes the commission. Right? If we close or the seller decides not to sell and we found a ready, willing, and able buyer, then they still owe us a commission. Paragraph 2 is what's called the broker safety clause or the broker protection clause. And this is you write in a number. It could be 30 days. It could be 45 days. It could be 60 days. I really don't care. I've never known anyone to collect on this in all the years that I've been doing it. But basically what this clause says is that if we give a list of people with whom we've negotiated with to the seller, and they within, I put in 45 days, they within 45 days after closing buy the property, then the seller owes us a commission. This is called the broker protection clause or the broker safety clause, right? Does everybody understand is everybody with me on that one? I'm not entirely sure looking. So let's say you're showing the property to a buyer and it's a 90-day listing and it's day 88, day 89. Do you understand the problem is that in 2 days they are going to drive by the house and your sign won't be there. And then they're going to go knock on the door. And they're going to say to the seller, what happened to your sign? Right? And the seller's going to say the listing expired. And they're going to say, well, do you still want to sell? Right? Does everybody understand? That's the reason. So we put in something. I don't really care if it's 30, 45. You should put in something. Then paragraph 3 is my favorite paragraph. It says, without broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale. Do you understand what that's saying? If the seller says, I've changed my mind. Now, what I typically would do, by the way, is because I would do this in a separate form, and the seller the right to cancel if they didn't want to continue. Right? It was a choice I made that I did not want to work with somebody who didn't want to work with me. Right? But do you understand the wording of the contract? This is sometimes called the easy out listing agreement. Right? I called it a weasel clause. Right? It would allow them to weasel out. But what it says is that if the property is withdrawn from sale, conveyed, leased, rented, otherwise transferred, or made unmarketable by a voluntary act of the seller during the listing period. Essentially what they're saying is the seller can't prevent you from selling the house. Right? So if you have a 90-day listing, the seller, unless you put it in an addendum or something, the seller can't just say, I've changed my mind. Now, do you understand, as a general rule, we're not in the business of suing people who've removed their homes from the market and we didn't sell it, right? This is not exactly the way to build up goodwill in referral business, but there's a reason for it, right? Do you understand? And the reason is that somebody may come and knock on the seller's door and say, hey, get rid of your agent, we'll buy it, we won't, and the cancellation form now, by the way, has wording about that. Then I'm not going to do, in addition, seller agrees to pay broker. Don't write in anything here. D talks about the MLS. It says broker is authorized to cooperate with and compensate brokers participating through the multiple listing services. And either what they're asking is, are you going to pay a percentage or a dollar amount? Now, in the old days, it didn't say how much, but agents would do bad things. In other words, agents would list it for 5%, keep 3 or 3.5, and put it in for 1.5 to the selling agent. Even though they knew that would discourage people from showing the property, they would have more money if they double-ended it, right? So now what you have to do is you have to say, I'm giving 3% to the agent who finds a buyer. Or it could be a dollar amount, right? But I'm just doing what would be typical. Does everybody, by the way, what I would do is once you've put it into the MLS, print out not the client printout, but the all printout, the full printout that has all of the secret information, and give it to the seller and have them sign a copy of it. Right, because that piece of paper is going to say how much the commission is to the selling agent, have all the private words and all that other kind of stuff. And it'd be good to have it in your file. What else? Seller authorizes, signs above compensation from broker's funds. F1, seller represents that seller has not previously entered into a listing agreement regarding the property unless specified as follows. So let me ask you this question. If the home is currently listed with another broker and the listing has not expired, could we be filling out this form with them?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, if it's not in the MLS.
No, if it's in the MLS, it's an active listing, it's going to expire, but it has not expired, could we be filling out this form with people?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. What you're going to notice is that most expired listings the next day go in as a listing. What happened? Did the guy wait till midnight? What do you think? The agent waited till midnight to talk to him? So what F is saying is, let's say the property is currently listed with another broker. We would type that in. Now you understand you're not allowed to solicit another broker's listing. But let's say a broker calls you up and they said, I hate my real estate agent. He never returns calls, isn't doing anything. He's got 2 more weeks and then he's gone. I want you to be my agent. Could you go talk to him now, even though there's a for sale sign, a blue for answer is yes. So you say that. It's unless Coldwell Banker. Seller warrants that seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless the property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities. Now, this is called the individuals or entities field. So if this is asking, have you signed anything else that says that if somebody, there are agreements, by the way, there's a form called the single compensation agreement. There's a form called the commission agreement. And what those forms do is that sometimes if a person is a for sale by owner, a real estate agent might have given the seller that form. And the form says, if my buyers buy the property, you owe me a commission. Right? Now, that's not a listing form, really. You understand? It's a commission agreement. If a particular buyer buys the property, you're asking, do you have any of these? Right? Have you signed any agreement to pay a commission to anyone if somebody buys the property? The answer is generally no. Paragraph 3 says that the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time seller is obligated to compensate another broker. Broker is not entitled to a compensation of this agreement. Broker is not obligated to represent the seller. So what this is saying is that if in the next 2 weeks that it's listed with Coldwell Banker, they manage to sell the property despite their incompetence, right? Then this agreement is no longer any good. Right? Does that make sense to everybody what I just said? So you could list it today, even though it's currently on the market with another broker and has not expired. And this is like a self-destruct clause that says if they manage to sell it, then this contract is gone and you don't owe us any money. Right? By the way, what you do is start the listing agreement the day after it expires. Just thought I should say that. Yes.
In that case, how can you start it before the other one ends?
I just said you would start it when the other one expires.
So that would be the date.
The date you would start it, the other one expires. But they could sign it now. You could even put in today's date if you wanted to. It's just simpler to start it the day the other one expires, because that paragraph says that if Coldwell Banker sells it, there's no obligation to pay you a commission. There really isn't a problem with the overlap. There really isn't. It's just it's a lot simpler to explain it to people that way. Yes, question.
How does this office prefer you handle it if you double end it, or do they want you to avoid double ending?
There's no law that says you cannot double end a transaction.
Okay.
It is not illegal, unethical, or immoral to double end a transaction.
The only way I could get my first listing last year, it actually was 6% back then, but I had to agree if I double ended it that we'd be paid 4.5% instead of 6. So this office is okay with that.
Yeah, sure. We would rather have 4.5 than 3 or 2. Right.
Okay.
Right. So there are a number of agents that will not represent both sides of a transaction because there is increased liability, but there is no policy against it. Right. I've double-ended a large number of transactions in my career. You just, by the way, every inspection and report, everything, right? I don't care if you have to pay for them. Do not let the buyer buy your listing without every inspection, right? Even if the buyer says, we don't want one, buy one for them, right? Out of your, I'm just saying, because what happens is almost all the litigation that involves dual agency like this involves some undisclosed defect. And what they're going to do is they're going to say that you told them not to get a roof inspection, right? They're going to say you told them not to get a foundation inspection, And if you had only not told them that, they would have gotten one and not bought it. So as long as you get every inspection and report and disclosure and do it right, it's okay. What's the name of our MLS? It's called MLS Listings. Huh? And notice it wants to know the MLS. Now, one of the things, and I'm not going to, I don't know how much time, I'll do this until people start to leave, but one of the questions, it says that MLS is or is not the primary MLS for the geographic area of the property. So let's say this house is in Fremont. Is MLS Listings the primary MLS for Fremont?
No.
No, it's not. Will you find Fremont listings in MLS Listings?
Some.
Yes, a few. So it's Bay East, right? The East Bay MLS that is in Fremont. So what you're supposed to do is that if you're not, you're supposed to check that box. If it's a Fremont, Newark, Union City, San Francisco, anything that's not in our primary MLS, could you put it in the Bay East MLS? The answer is yes, right? And I don't even know what the fee is, but sometimes they charge what's called a reciprocal listing fee, right? You ought to pay it. I'm just saying. It ought to go in the MLS where it's located, right? Now, I know real estate agents that what they've done because they're cheap, thrifty, is they'll just put it in our MLS and they won't put it in the MLS where the property is located to save a few bucks, right? And then the property doesn't sell. Do you understand how you would have a great difficulty explaining this to the judge if they sued you? And so if this is not the right MLS, you need to check the box. Now, what I would be doing is explaining to them how I'm going to be putting it into the Bay East MLS also. It's going to go into Metro List, right? I'm going to be putting it in San Francisco, right? We're going to be doing that too. Now, this whole paragraph here is basically saying you ought to put it in the MLS and you ought not to have a non-MLS listing, right? That's what it says. Does everybody, yeah.
You want to put the house into the MLS where the property is located as well as our MLS?
Sure, it doesn't hurt to do it. They're not going to charge you to put it in our MLS. They'll just charge you probably to put it in the other MLS. So you might as well put it in both. Why not? Why not?
No.
By the way, nowadays it's less. There are some agents that just have gotten into the habit of using the CRMLS or one of the regional ones like Find, which is one of the other programs to look for. People are just getting used to that because you can see all the properties no matter which MLS they're in, right? So if you go to CRMLS, how many people know what I'm talking about? Okay, if you go to CRMLS and you put in Fremont, it's showing you listings from both the Bay East as well as our MLS. But just as how many people raised their hand when they said they knew what I was talking about? See how many hands went up? Not that many. So that means that a lot of real estate agents aren't doing that. So I would put it in my MLS. I'd put it in the MLS for that particular area. Right. If I were going to skip one, I would skip our MLS. Right. If I were going to skip one, but you know. All right. Does that make
I had a question not related to that, so if you don't want to take another question before mine related to that, that's fine.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, if you have a listing agreement and you're in escrow and then the listing expires and it doesn't close for, let's say, another 3 months after it expires, do you have to get something else in writing, or do you cover it?
No, you do not have to get anything else in writing. What the paragraph said is that if it closes. So if it's finding already, what the paragraph says, and by the way, people that have broker's licenses are essentially paid to read forms, right? I don't know if you understand that the thing that separates Michael Sibilia from common real estate agents is he's actually read all the forms, right? That's the big difference. And so it says that if during the listing period, see that paragraph there? Or any extension, broker, cooperative broker, seller, or any other person procures a ready, willing, and able buyer. It doesn't matter when it closes. It just matters that when was the buyer procured, and if as long as it was during the listing period, you get paid. But you don't have to get an extension because the listing ran out and escrow hasn't closed. It doesn't have to close during the listing period. It just has to be sold during the listing period. The only time you have a problem is if that transaction falls through. Right?
And then we're going to try to relist it. Or...
Well, you can try to relist it. If they make another offer and it's accepted, the argument would still be that the procuring occurred during the listing period. There's legal articles you can read about what constitutes procuring costs. Did you have a question?
Do you have an idea of what the additional fee is to
No.
list a property in Bay East?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, not anymore. All right, so this long box, which originally they didn't have a box, then they had a box, and then they put in initials, basically says you ought to put it in the MLS if you want to get the highest price possible. All right, MLS rules provide MLS rules. Basically, this is just talking about, there's nothing here I really want to spend much time on. Seller representations. I would recommend that you read this. By the way, if you would like to get somebody to fill this out, my recommendation is that you spend some time every week reading this form aloud. Right? Find somebody you don't like and tell them that you want to practice. Do you understand? Because would it be important for you to know where things are in it? And by the way, if you're thinking about this from a practical point of view, so the couple is sitting over there and I'm sitting across the table and I've printed out the form because I've got the pen and I'm going through the form, I'm going to have to be doing that upside down. Right? Do you understand? The form is turned around so they can see it. That means I'm going to have to be able to point at the paragraphs upside down and explain what they say. Right? Can you do that? All right. By the way, this is the easy one. When we get to the residential purchase agreement, you're going to need to be able to explain each of those paragraphs pretty much upside down. We're going to practice this. This one is the easy one. By the way, if I have a listing and I get 5 offers and you call me up and say, what's your highest offer? Am I allowed to tell you?
Yeah.
Depends on if the solicitor.
You mean another agent calls you?
Right.
Yeah.
I have 5 offers. An agent calls me and said, what's the highest offer? Can I tell you? Yes? Sure. Isn't that violent? So this is broker and seller's duties. Look at this. I would read this. Broker is authorized to order reports and disclosures as necessary, advertise in the market, any method, any mean broker, including the MLS, and to the extent permitted, control the dissemination. And how about this paragraph here? This is little 3. Disclose to any real estate licensee making an inquiry the receipt of any offers on the property, the offering price of such offers. That's what it says. So not only might I want to tell you what the high, because I tell you, sometimes what I would do is I'd say, well, the highest offer is $750. You're going to need to beat that. Right? Why shouldn't I tell you that? Do I want another $690 offer? No, I don't want another one.
And do I want to bring my sellers an offer of $755?
Right. I'm going to tell you, you got to do better. By the way, what I would then do, we're going to talk about counter offers.
Why is it that agents will always disclose?
Because they've never read the contract. And they don't know it. Most real estate agents have learned the real estate they know on the street. Right? They've hung around with other real estate agents and they've come to their own conclusions. Most real estate agents cannot tell you what the forms say. I know I used to teach continuing education and we wouldn't give people a copy of the form and we would ask them questions about it. The ignorance is just amazing. Yes.
Could you use this in, I wouldn't say to hammer on the other agent, but to say, you know, what's your highest offer? What do you have?
You can use it, but usually arrogant listing agents are just going to get upset with you. Right? They'll tell you how long they've been in the business.
Yeah.
Right? They'll say, you don't understand, I've been in the business.
But I did say, well, haven't you looked at number 7, you know, paragraph
Right,
7?
but it doesn't say they have to tell you.
No, but they're going to, it's maybe not, remember we talked about how to get the multiple counter offers. We talked about how do you get yours accepted. Fighting with the listing agent may not be the best way to do it.
I'm going overboard, but I'm just saying it could happen.
It could happen,
Yeah.
you know, because I've had people say it's illegal. And I'm like, no, it's not. You know, yes, it is. Well, no, it's not. Yes.
Okay, I mean, so but then you don't want, how can you avoid into a bidding war?
Well, I don't know. It's a bidding war right now.
I mean, multiple counter.
Well, see, I'll tell you what I'm going to do as a listing agent is I'll keep telling people, oh, 750 is the highest offer. Somebody says 760. I tell the next agent 760 because I'm going to take the top 3, 4, or 5 and counter them, most likely. Right? Do you understand? You can do a multiple. We'll talk about counter offer. You can do a multiple counter offer. So if it's 750 and her buyer says 760, I'm not going to just say sold because I didn't give the other guy a chance. Right? I might call the 750 up and say, hey, you know, I just thought you need to know you've moved from first to second place. Right? But we could counter them both. Or just, but I'm just saying that you need to read this form. This is called the hold harmless clause that says that basically if the seller lies to you, you're not responsible for passing their lies on, which also just means you ought to read. I'm not going to do all this, the dual agency with the buyer. You ought to read that. Security and insurance. And by the way, this is a form that ought to be gone over carefully with people. Do you want stuff stolen? Do you want to make sure that they put away their valuables? If they have guns and things, that they're locked up because kids are going to be running around the property. You should talk about that. Photographs and advertising. You should read these paragraphs because they need to know that there is going to be pictures taken of their house and put on the MLS and putting on the internet. Additional terms, you don't need to write anything here, right? You don't need anything here. Dispute resolution, arbitration, and mediation are part of it. My explanation of that to a client would be mediation is like marriage counseling. You know, if you're fighting, you go to a marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor says, you ought to not smoke cigars in the house, right? And she says, I like smoking cigars in the house, right? And arbitration is divorce court, right? You understand? You don't have to pay attention to the mediator, but you're going to end up in divorce court. And then ownership and title. This paragraph is an important one. It basically says the seller warrants that the seller owns the property, and if there's anyone else, now's the time to mention their names. By the way, the MLS says is that everybody who's on title should be signing the form, right? And the seller advisory, I don't know if you want me to, we can talk more about this later, but you ought to read it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sign it. Does that sound like fun? So, and by the way, I've done this with people in the same room because they were into it. I had some clients from Google, they did it right in the same room, right? They didn't want anything printed out. Everything was done on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we're going to go to sign. First of all, I'm going to save it. And if I can spend a few minutes, I just want to go through the signing process. So if I highlight this, it says sign this form or sign multiple forms. So if I put everything together, I could click on sign multiple forms. Now what it's going to do is it's going to want to know which forms do I want to have signed. I guess I put in 2 residential listing agreements. I didn't need that. Authorization to exclude from the MLS. Now, I would have looked at each form before I've done that. But this is, I've selected the forms, and it sort of walks you through it. Select the forms, click on next. And then it has, we haven't filled out everybody's, but there's only one seller that I picked. And by the way, if there were 2, you can drag them on top of each other. So let me just show what I mean. So this is Sammy, seller, Now notice I just added somebody in right in this part. I could add people in through the there's a lot of different ways. I just added somebody in now. If let's say I want Sammy to be first. So notice oops, I'm going to click on done.
How do you add those to your contacts so that their email is?
Up here under contacts. But you can add them under contacts to begin with. You could add them under parties. You can put them on the worksheet. And if you forget, you can do it right before you send it. So notice they're numbered. Seller 1 gets it first. Seller 2 gets it second. If I drag it up, notice I can change it so that seller number 2 is now in the first place. I can move them around. Notice how this one has, I'm going to drop it down here. So I can also take the 2 of them and put them on top of each other. Notice how they both say 1. Did everybody see what I just did? I dragged them so that they were on top of each other. So the order now says 1 for both of them. That means that they both can be signing at exactly the same time. All right, you don't have to have it go to this person and then go to that person and then come back to you. You can have them both get it at one time. See how it's one solid block? If I drag one down and let it go, notice this one is going first, that one is going second. Right? So I can change the order, or the easiest thing to do is put them on top of each other and let them both get it at once. Is that all right? Now we're going to click on next. This isn't very difficult. And yeah.
I've been told that with 2 people, like husband and wife on the title, that for the listing agreement, technically only one of them has to sign the listing agreement.
Who has to sign the listing agreement? Well, those of you that have recently gone through real estate school might have learned that you only need one signature on a listing agreement for it to be valid. In theory, that's true, in that the contract between the buyer and the seller, between the agent and the seller, is a valid contract if only one signs. However, multiple listing service regulations state that you're not to put a listing into the MLS without a signature from all the owners. So although in the abstract it's an enforceable listing agreement, the multiple listing service is going to fine you if they find out that you did it. Right? So for purposes of, how about this? Husband and wife both need to sign the listing. How about that? They both need to sign the listing. We'll just, all right. So now we're looking at it. Now, by the way, if it's one of the standard forms, it's already pretty much figured out where everything goes. And if we go down here, notice here's and by the way, people say, well, this is blocking me. You can grab it and move it around, right? I don't know if you knew that. So notice how it's already put in signature blocks there. It's already put them in. And so you can scroll through to make sure it didn't miss any, right? There are signature blocks there, signature blocks, and signature blocks. And notice how it's filled it all. Now, if you're really fussy and you say, well, the date is really over here. Oops. I was being too fussy. And I want that over. See, sometimes it does this. I just, by the way, was too lazy to do any of that. I just would leave them alone, right? So, but as you go through, it's going to put in their signature and their date right next to it. And you could, if I put in the listing agent's information, it would be there. Now, it allows us, see, this is a signature field, an initial field, a checkbox, a read, acknowledge, and a text box field. Sometimes the agent, let's say you're representing the buyer, the listing agent might have given you a copy of all the different inspections and reports, and what they want is the first page of the termite inspection with the buyer's initials on it, right? Sometimes they stamp it, right, with a little stamp, and it says sign and initial here. So what I used to do is I would upload those forms. You can upload a PDF and drop in a place for them to initial, sign, and date. If we wanted to fill something out, see there's a text box form, we could click on that and drag in a text box and actually type stuff in. What I might do next week just for fun, Lindsay will be here next week too, we're going to go through those disclosure forms. I'll take my favorite is the San Jose street tree disclosure, and I'll show you how to fill it out and send it using zip forms. Yes.
That particular form, interestingly, I was required to have somebody that purchased property in the Santa Cruz Mountains sign that, and it was not even in the county. So the San Jose tree thing didn't seem appropriate.
It probably isn't. They're agents that don't know what they're doing.
I was told from here that I had to have my client sign.
Oh, I don't know. That's one of I can't help that. Generally, transaction coordinators are given a checklist and they want to see everything in the file. Right. But the San Jose street tree disclosure is for San Jose. By the way, notice up here at this checkbox, we can look at each of the forms, right? By clicking, does everybody see what I'm doing? Clicking on that, we can look at each of the different forms so that we can make sure that they've all been filled out. Right, and I made that go away. And I can save it, I could quit. Let's just go to send. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it. And it says, and by the way, I'll be done in 5 minutes, okay? I know I got into the listing agreement. See here it says modify submission. Supposing I realize I made a mistake. Right? Supposing I want to check, until somebody has signed the form, I can modify the submission. What that would typically happen is that if somebody calls me up, I've just sent it, right? I just sent it, and somebody calls me up and they said, look could you change the email address for my wife? She doesn't want it to come to her work, right? She wants a different email. Can you do that? The answer is yes. Right? Because she hasn't gotten it yet, she hasn't signed it. We can go to modify submission. And when we do this, it suspends it. And then it's going to show me the different forms and I can make changes. Right? I could change who's getting it. I can make changes. All right. And so now it's showing me the forms again. So I'm just going to click on resume. Why not? Or resume. And then all right, and then you could view the history, you could download. What I'm going to do, just for fun, because I know you're dying to see, and it hasn't come in yet. Let's just see. By the way, so what I'm going to suggest that you do is fill out a listing agreement and send it to yourself. And sign it. And don't ask me if you have to sell your house if you do that. But, right, so you want to do it. See, this is what it looked. Now, notice, because of the way I did it, they're all coming to me, right? It said suspended. So my documents are ready to review. So they're both coming to the same one. This is what the client's going to get. To access your documents, click here. Now, the reason why you want to go through this is that you want to make sure you know what they're having to go through in case they call you and ask questions. So you can explain it to them. Right now, this is really simple to do. You have to accept it. You have to click on that little box, click on next. You should read it. That's a required disclosure. And this is kind of fun. You can draw your signature and initials. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but you could, right, if you have a touch screen or you're good with the mouse, you could do that. Or you could just pick a font, right? You say, I like that one. And then you select a pen and you confirm it. And you click on, the pen must be at least 6 characters. All right. So, all right. Does everybody see? I was doing that just so you could see. Now, I'm having difficulty with this part. Must be 6 characters and at least one number and one letter. All right. So now we click on to sign a review. So here they are, initial. So I'm just going to click on next. And what happens if it's a standard form like the listing or the purchase agreement, you click on OK and you go through, and what they have to do is they sort of have to start. See where it says click here to sign? They click there. And then scroll, 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 click there. Scroll, 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 click there. So this is really difficult. Really difficult. And then click there, and click there. And then just keep doing it. What I want you to do, and then until you click on finish signing, you're not finished. And you have to click, you can click on next signature or task. We're going to click on finish signing. It's going to ask, are you sure? Are you really sure? Are you really, really, really sure? We're going to say, yes, we're really, really sure. And then they've signed the documents. And by the way, as an agent, if we were to go back to the transaction, and if we were to go back to the transaction, so this is the transaction, I'm going to close this.
So if they miss some fields, the system doesn't.
If they miss the field, they'll be taken to the field that they've missed. So now if I want to see where it says e-sign up here, I have to let this refresh. Let me just let it refresh. And when I let it refresh, it should give me a choice. It hasn't done it yet. But what's going to happen, I swear, what's going to happen is that it's going to give me under e-signature, there's going to be a choice now. Which one am I modified 13 minutes ago? This must be it. See this little purple thing down here? You see that little, that means that e-signatures are being used. So if I click on that drop down, it's going to give me all these different choices, including open. And what it's going to do is allow me to check the status. Eventually, I'm going to get an email that says everybody's signed. I'm going to get an email that says see now how it says check status? Everybody see that? So it shows that it's in progress. There's been one signed, but everybody hasn't signed it yet. When they're all signed, it's going to show that they've both been signed. Right? Was that fun? So practice, do a listing, send it to yourself, and it'll be fun. Won't it be fun? No? All right, now let's see. How to add KW forms to the template. No way to confirm the other agent with the other, right. There's no way to tell what the other agent tells you. How to add KW. Next week, I'm going to show you how to upload PDF forms into the e-signature process and fill them out. We'll do the street tree disclosure, even though it's a controversial form. And we'll do a couple of the other forms and fill them out. Does that sound like a lot of fun? All right, cool. That's it. See you guys next week.